For a long time, when I thought of Peavey amps, I thought of two things: beginner metal guitar players and undercover boss. I pretty much held that opinion until a couple of years ago, which Zach Childs had something to do with. One Facebook Marketplace deal, and a few gigs later, I'm convinced I was completely wrong, and the old Peavey solid-state amps, like this one, are some of the best value for money in the amp game out there. So what is this? This is a Peavey Studio Pro 40. It's a smaller version of the better-known Peavey Bandit. There have been a couple of iterations of this amp. This particular one is the second iteration. It's from the mid-80s. And you can find these for under $200 all day. This particular one was in someone's garage, and they had abandoned it for about a decade. And then they sold it to me for $75. Several of the jacks were loose. It was crackling all over the place. Some of the controls seemed to not work. But after I cleaned it out for about a half hour and just tightened a couple of things, it worked just like new. And that really leads me to what these amps are about. Peavey amps from the beginning were built for working musicians, and they were built to last with minimal maintenance. So if you're gigging, we can argue a lot about what's best, but most of the time what you want is just something that sounds good and that is still going to sound good if you throw it down a flight of steps. Not that you plan on it, but things happen. So for the same reason that Telecasters and Boss pedals are still king, these amps really developed a strong following among players in the 80s and 90s. But of course, you do need your amp to sound good. So how does it stack up? First of all, I'm not going to tell you that this sounds better than my Vox AC15. It doesn't. I'm not going to tell you that I would rather play this than a deluxe reverb. Again, I wouldn't. But there are some excellent sounds in here, especially clean sounds. I've found the key to getting good sounds out of this is to keep the treble and mid controls both low. They can get out of hand fairly quickly. But keeping these low for clean sounds, and then dialing in the saturation control just enough to get a little bit of compression without it really sounding like the amp is saturated, and then dialing in a little reverb to taste. It'll really get you into Curtis Mayfield, Jimi Hendrix kind of territory. This also can operate as an excellent jazz amp if you roll the tone back on your guitar a little bit. This kind of big, clean sound is exactly what you're looking for. And of course, speaking of big, clean sounds, you might be thinking, does that make it a good pedal platform? And the answer is yes. This will handle overdrives excellently. That's a separate video. I want to focus on the amp right now, but do know that that's true. So how about the distorted sounds from this amp? They might not be exactly the distorted sounds in your head. So depending on what you're looking for, you might be better off using a pedal or picking a different amp for distorted sounds. But the distortion in this amp is usable. I'll show you a couple of examples with the saturation cranked. And this is a sound that I have used on gigs and just used the volume control on my guitar for cleanup, approaching it like it's an old tube amp, and it has absolutely done the job. As an added bonus, let's look on the back. It has an effects loop. which means that you can plug your modeler into the power amp if you're a modeler user, and get yourself stage volume. And then if your modeler goes down for any reason, you can still plug into the front of the amp and you can finish the gig. So is this the best amp in the world? From a tonal perspective, no. But if you were looking for the best amp in the world, you probably weren't watching a video about Peavey solid state amps anyway. But if you need something that sounds good day in and day out, that you don't need to worry about, that can live in your car, that can take a beating, this is it. And that's been my experience. With this amp, I've gotten to play music with other people and not had to worry about the box behind me at all. And that makes me happy.